I still remember the sound of my own footsteps in the empty corridor that morning. They echoed like questions no one dared to ask. I was Ambassador Leela Ramanathan, a name that once carried weight in diplomatic circles. A woman trusted to speak for her nation, a woman celebrated for her calm judgment in the most difficult rooms. I had sat across tables where wars were calmed, where trade was born, where countries learned to trust each other again. I had signed papers that would outlive me. I had built a life on reason, on heritage, on duty. And I believed, with all my heart, that the gods of my ancestors watched over every breath I took. But nothing in my training, nothing in my upbringing, prepared me for the day my world would be broken open by a whisper I could not explain. It began with my daughter, Orohi, my heart, my laughter, my reason for coming home at the end of long negotiations. She was 12, graceful and curious, always asking questions I could not answer, always lighting the rooms of our home like a festival in human form. One day, she came home with a fever. At first, it seemed ordinary, the sort of thing that passes with rest and care. But it did not pass. It grew. Her strength left her like water slipping through open fingers. Hospital after hospital, specialist after specialist, every door opened with hope and closed with heavier silence. I carried her into temples, offered prayers that bent me to my knees. I whispered promises into the smoke of incense, begged gods I had trusted since childhood to show me mercy. I gave, I fasted, I obeyed. Yet she lay there, eyes dimming, body weakening, and I felt the strong walls of my world begin to shake. There were nights when I sat by her bed in the hospital, staring at the thin line on the monitor that told me her heart still fought. My phone would vibrate with diplomatic urgencies, requests from capitals I had served, but I could no longer care about politics or treaties. I was a mother first. A mother who would have given her name, her title, her nation, her very life, if only her child could rise from that bed and smile again. Friends came, well-meaning, sorrow in their eyes. Some prayed quietly in corners. Others placed new gods in my hands, saying, "Try this blessing, try this mantra." I did. I tried them all. Still, the illness deepened. And then, in a quiet waiting room, a colleague named Priya placed her hand gently on mine. "Leela," she said, her voice steady, "may I pray for Orohi in the name of Jesus?" I almost laughed, not out of mockery, but out of exhaustion. I had nothing left to defend. My pride, my cultural loyalty, my intellectual arguments, they all lay scattered on the cold tile floors of those hospital nights. I nodded. And in that small act, in that small yes, something began, not a thunderclap, not a flash of light, not a shaking of the ground, but something deep, quiet, powerful, like the first breath after drowning. That night, as I sat alone by Orohi's bed, I whispered a name I had never spoken in faith before. I said, "Jesus, if you are real, if you can hear me, if you care, please, help my daughter." I did not know it then, but that prayer would become the line between the life I had known and the life that waited for me. It would lead me from the security of tradition into the unknown of grace. It would lead me from empty strength into a power I could not explain. It would lead me from a diplomat's carefully measured words to a believer's uncontainable testimony. I tell you this now not as an ambassador, not as a woman of influence, but as a witness. I saw what I cannot unsee. I heard what I cannot forget. I lived through a love so fierce, so gentle, so undeniable, that it rewrote everything I thought was unshakable. This is not just a story about religion. It is a story about a living God, who stepped into my carefully arranged world, reached into my deepest pain, and brought light where there was only despair. And it began with a daughter's illness. A mother's desperation. And a whisper from a savior I did not yet know by name. My name is Leela Ramanathan. This is my story. Before the night I called on the name of Jesus, before the weight of sickness bent my knees in surrender, my life was perfectly measured. I was not reckless. I did not make decisions without thinking them through. My parents raised me to be strong, strategic, respectful, and relentless in the pursuit of excellence. I came from a lineage of scholars and statesmen. My father taught history at the university. My mother served as a cultural advisor to the state government. I was their only child, the one they had invested every hope in, and I carried that weight with honor. From an early age, I understood that words could move mountains of policy, that diplomacy could prevent bloodshed, that one voice, carefully placed, could change the fate of thousands. I studied languages not for pleasure, but for precision. I learned the scriptures of my faith, the philosophies of my people, the traditions that had shaped our nation for centuries. I bowed before gods in temples older than my country's modern borders. I felt pride in knowing where I came from, in belonging to something vast and ancient, something unshaken by the noise of the modern world. By the time I was 30, I had served in embassies in 3 different countries. I had worn the sari of ceremony in marble halls where world leaders toasted agreements. I had walked into negotiations where every eye waited to see whether India would bend or hold its ground. I never allowed my face to betray nerves. I learned how to hold silence as power, how to smile when insulted, how to disagree without burning bridges. My name, Leela Ramanathan, opened doors. My presence meant India was watching, India was speaking. I married late, by cultural standards. Orohi's father, Vikram, was a surgeon, brilliant, calm, devoted to his patients more than to politics. We built our life on respect, not on drama. We understood each other's silences. We both carried pride in our traditions. He, too, had grown up with mantras sung into the dawn, with prayers offered to deities adorned with flowers and fire. Our wedding was a masterpiece of color and ceremony. We placed our future in the hands of gods we could not see, but felt close through generations of belief. When Orohi was born, I felt as though every ancestral blessing had converged in one tiny, perfect human. She had her father's calm eyes and my restless curiosity. She was the only child we had, not by choice, but by providence. A difficult pregnancy had nearly taken my life, and the doctors warned against trying again. So every ounce of maternal love, every late-night story, every prayer, every protective instinct poured into her. I wanted her to know her heritage. I taught her to fold her hands before the altar, to offer thanks before meals, to respect elders, to never speak without thinking. Yet, she was born in a changing world. Her questions often surprised me. Mama, how do we know the gods hear us? Why do we pray to so many? Does one answer faster than the others? Sometimes I would smile, sometimes I would deflect. I never doubted, not then. I thought faith was like diplomacy, a system you follow, a tradition you protect, a structure that preserves peace. And I believed, with every logical bone in my body, that nothing could truly shake the ground I stood on. My faith and my career were pillars. My family, the garden I returned to when the world felt sharp. I had no space in my mind for spiritual disruption. I respected other religions, but I carried no interest in them. I treated belief like nationality, fixed, inherited, non-negotiable. But the first crack in that certainty came quietly, not through debate, not through politics, but through pain. When Orohi's illness arrived, it arrived like an uninvited guest who would not leave. At first, I fought it the way I fought every problem, methodically. Specialists. Private clinics. International consultations. Vikram scoured medical journals, consulted peers across borders. We had influence, we used it. Nothing worked. Her body grew weaker. My work grew irrelevant. My prayers grew desperate. I found myself sitting in temple courtyards in the middle of the night, watching candles flicker and die, wondering whether the heavens had closed their ears. I kept my composure in public, but inside I was breaking. I wondered whether the gods were punishing me, whether some ancestral offense had slipped past the rituals. I performed every corrective ceremony anyone suggested. Still, the child who once danced through our home now lay still, her skin pale, her breath shallow, her smile gone. It was in that season, the season where hope felt like a story other people told, that I experienced something I could not reason through. One night, after a particularly difficult day of test results and inconclusive diagnoses, I fell asleep in the hospital chair beside Orohi's bed. I did not mean to sleep, exhaustion simply claimed me. And in that sleep, something happened. I found myself standing in a place I did not recognize. It was not the hospital. It was not a temple. It was a wide, open expanse, not empty, but full in a way I cannot describe with earthly words. There was light, but it was not harsh. It was not from a source I could see, it seemed to breathe. It carried warmth, not like the sun, but like comfort that moved through bone and memory. I looked down and saw that I was barefoot, yet I felt no cold, no danger. I remember calling out for Orohi, for Vikram, for anyone. My voice sounded clearer than it ever had. And then, from a distance, I saw someone walking toward me. At first, I thought it was a doctor. The gait was steady, strong, but unhurried. The closer the figure came, the more I realized I did not know this person, and yet, I felt no fear. I felt a pull, a knowing, as though my soul recognized what my mind did not. When he finally stood before me, I saw his face, gentle yet firm, eyes that held both sorrow and victory, like he knew every ache in me and had already carried it somewhere beyond pain. He did not speak first. He simply reached out his hand. When his hand touched mine, a weight I did not know I was carrying slid off me like water off glass. I began to cry, not from sadness, but from relief, from the realization that every desperate prayer had been heard. And then he spoke. His voice was not loud, but it filled everything around me. "Your daughter will live," he said, "and you will know me." I tried to speak, to ask who he was, but before the words could form, I woke up. The hospital room returned around me, the beeping machines, the sterile smell, the dim light, and there was Orohi, still weak, still fragile, but breathing peacefully. I sat upright, my heart pounding. My hand still tingled where his had touched it. I looked at my daughter and whispered, "Something has changed." At that moment, I could not explain it. I did not yet call him Jesus. I did not yet know what it would cost me. But that night, that encounter that felt more real than waking life, was the first thread of a new story being woven through mine. When I woke from that strange place, with the warmth of a touch still ghosting across my hand, I told myself it was exhaustion. The human mind, deprived of sleep and flooded with fear, creates strange things. That's what I thought. That's what I wanted to think. Because believing that someone had actually met me somewhere between sleep and waking, that was too much for a person like me. Diplomats deal in what can be documented, signed, verified. Dreams do not belong in reports. But life does not pause to let you catch your breath. Orohi's numbers, the ones the doctors watched like lifelines, started dropping again 2 days later. Her breathing grew shallow. Machines beeped faster, then slower. Nurses rushed in, faces suddenly tight, voices low. Vikram stood beside me with his hands in his hair, silent in a way I had never seen him. I remember gripping the cold rail of her bed so hard that my palms ached. In those moments, you don't think about politics, or heritage, or even yourself. You think only about the person you love slipping away in front of you, and how utterly powerless you are. I stopped going home. My office sent messages, urgent cables, requests for my presence, reminders of upcoming talks. I ignored them all. My career, the one thing I had built with fierce focus, blurred into background noise. I slept in hospital chairs, showered in hospital bathrooms, ate whatever friends pushed into my hands. I became a woman standing between her child and the abyss, with nothing left to offer but her own breaking heart. The rituals kept coming. Priests were called. Relatives sent new instructions from different cities, this offering, that chant, this sequence of prayers at this precise hour. I did them all. My mouth spoke ancient words even when my mind had gone numb. Vikram and I held each other in silence after each attempt failed to bring even a flicker of change. Then came the moment that stripped away even the thin cover of control I thought I had. It was late, almost midnight. Orohi's oxygen levels had dropped suddenly. A nurse ran for the attending physician. Vikram and I were ushered into the hallway as a team crowded her bed. The hallway was long and cold, lit with the kind of harsh light that makes everything feel exposed. I leaned against the wall because my legs wouldn't carry me upright anymore. I watched through the glass as they worked, their gestures urgent but controlled. Time changed shape in that hallway. Minutes stretched. Every sound became loud, the squeak of shoes on tile, the hiss of oxygen, the clipped instructions of a doctor trying not to alarm us. I stared at the door until my vision blurred. And then, in that sterile corridor, I felt something that had nothing to do with medicine. It was like the air shifted around me, like a pressure without weight. Not frightening, not dramatic, just different. I closed my eyes. And without planning, without thinking, words rose in me, not in Sanskrit, not in any mantra I knew, but simple, unadorned words, please. I don't know who you are, but you said she would live. You said I would know you. Please. Keep your word. I opened my eyes and Vikram was watching me. He didn't ask what I had said. Maybe he thought I was whispering a chant. Maybe he was too numb to care. But I knew, deep down, I had stepped out of everything I had built my life on. I wasn't appealing to a system anymore. I wasn't negotiating. I was pleading with someone I couldn't see, someone I had met only in that lightful place that my rational mind still tried to dismiss. Minutes later, the door opened. The doctor stepped out, his face unreadable for a terrifying second, then softening just slightly. She's stable for now, he said. We've managed to get her oxygen back up. It's still critical, but she's responding. Responding. The word wrapped itself around my chest like fragile hope. We were allowed back in. Orohi looked so small, tubes snaking from her arms, tape on her face, monitors tracing invisible battles. I sat beside her and took her hand, whispering again the name I had barely dared to speak in that dream. That night was the first time I let myself cry openly. Not the quiet tears that fall when no one's watching, but the kind that take your breath, the kind that pull sound from deep inside you. Vikram held me. We didn't talk. There were no words left that could do anything. Days bled into each other. Some hours looked like improvement, others looked like the edge of goodbye. Every morning, I woke up with the same prayer lodged in my chest: if you are real, do not let her die. And then, another thing happened, small at first, almost hidden in the noise of hospital life. Nurses began to comment on her color, on how her breathing sounded a little stronger. A visiting specialist looked puzzled at her latest scans. He asked for the older ones, then compared them, then called in a colleague. They spoke quietly in the corner of the room, glancing at her, then at us, then back at the charts. "She's improving," one finally said, half amazed. "We don't know why. Nothing in the medication explains this rate of recovery." I felt something like electricity in my chest, not the clinical kind, not literal, but the kind that comes when impossible starts to bend. In the middle of that strange climb back from the edge, I had a second experience, not like the first, not in sleep. I had left the ward to get coffee. The corridor was empty. As I walked back, the sound of the world seemed to fade, not gone, just distant, like someone had turned the volume down. For a moment, the fluorescent light seemed softer. And in that quiet, I felt, more than heard, a presence beside me. It was not visible. It did not speak with a mouth. But it filled me with a certainty that would be hard to justify to anyone else. The same warmth from the dream, the same weightless gravity, the same sense that I was known completely and not condemned. And a single thought, as if placed gently into my own mind: I am with you. I stopped walking. People moved past me, unaware. I stood in the corridor, with tears sliding silently down my face. I didn't argue this time. I didn't try to explain it away. I just let the truth settle where logic had no power. Someone, somehow, was answering me. The crisis hadn't ended. Orohi was still in a fragile state. We still didn't know what had caused any of this, but inside me, the panic began to loosen its grip. Fear was still there, but it no longer owned the room. For a woman who had lived by control, by planning, by precision, that surrender felt like both a loss and a rescue. I didn't know yet what believing would require of me. I didn't know how far the road ahead would pull me from the life I'd built. But I knew, with the kind of knowing that sits deeper than proof, that the fight over Orohi's life was no longer mine alone. And for the first time in weeks, I breathed without choking on despair. The first time I saw him, I thought it was a dream. The second time, when I felt that quiet presence in the hospital corridor, I thought it was my mind finally breaking under too much pressure. But what came next, I cannot call a dream. It was not a hallucination. It was not the blurred half-awake space between night and morning. It happened when I was fully awake, standing, breathing, terrified, and somehow at peace all at the same time. It began on a morning that should have been like any other. Orohi had stabilized enough for us to move her from intensive care to a quieter recovery ward. It was the first time in weeks that Vikram and I had been able to stand beside her bed without a dozen machines between us. I remember brushing her hair gently to one side, whispering things she couldn't answer, but hoping she could hear. Priya, the colleague who had first offered to pray, came to visit. She carried no flowers, no gifts, just a stillness that, at that point, I had come to recognize as rare. She asked if she could read something over Orohi. I nodded. I had stopped resisting help in any form. Pride dies fast in the presence of death. She opened a small, worn book and read a story about a father who begged Jesus to heal his child. She didn't try to explain it. She just read. Her voice never wavered, but mine did. Every word landed like a stone dropping into deep water somewhere inside me. When she finished, she said, very simply, "Leela, Jesus is alive. He listens. You can talk to him like you talk to anyone." I didn't answer. I didn't know how. Part of me wanted to protect the walls of everything I had believed. Another part of me was too tired to hold those walls up any longer. That night, after Vikram had gone home to change and Priya had left, I sat in that small ward with Orohi breathing softly beside me. The hospital was unusually quiet. The usual buzz of machines and footsteps seemed to fall away. I remember placing my hand over Orohi's and whispering again the only honest prayer I had left: "If you are the one who met me, if you are the one I felt, if you are the one who promised she would live, I need you now. I have nothing else left to trade. I have no temple left to run to. If you are who Priya says you are, if you are Jesus, then show me you are here." It wasn't a formula. It wasn't polished. It was a mother talking like a child to someone she hoped was listening. I closed my eyes, not to sleep, just to shut out the harsh light of the ward. And then, as though a curtain had been pulled back, the room changed. I didn't leave my body. I didn't float away. I was still in that chair. I could still feel the weight of my own hands. But something entered the space that made the air feel alive. I opened my eyes because I was afraid I'd imagined it. But the room looked the same: walls, bed, machines. And yet, everything felt full, like invisible music played through every molecule. And he was there. Not as a shadow in the corner, not as a voice in my mind, but standing, as real as any person I've ever known, at the foot of Orohi's bed. I cannot describe his face the way you describe a passport photo. It wasn't about features, it was about presence. He looked at me, and in that look, every question I had ever carried seemed to dissolve. It wasn't that I suddenly understood everything, it was that understanding no longer felt necessary. I was known. I was loved. The weight of a lifetime of trying to be worthy fell off me in an instant. I didn't speak at first. Tears came before words. He stepped closer, and without moving his lips, I heard him, not with my ears, but with a clarity deeper than sound. "Do not be afraid," he said. "I have heard you. I have been with you from the first moment you called." I tried to form words, but all that came out was a shaking whisper. "Who are you?" He smiled, not a smile of amusement, but of recognition, as though he had waited for that question. "I am Jesus," he said. "The one who holds life. The one who called you here. Your daughter is in my hands. She will live, and through her healing you will know that I am who I say I am." I looked at Orohi. For the first time in weeks, her chest rose with steady, peaceful breaths. Color had returned to her lips. Her face looked like sleep, not sickness. I turned back to him, trembling. "What do you want from me?" I asked, because that's what a diplomat asks when the terms of peace have been laid on the table. "I want you," he said gently. "Not your status. Not your rituals. Just you. To walk with me, to learn who I am, to let me show you the truth that love is not earned but given." Every instinct in me wanted to protest: the loyalty to tradition, the fear of betrayal, the cultural weight of leaving the faith of my ancestors. But none of those thoughts had strength in that moment. All I could feel was a pull, not of force, but of belonging. Like a river finally finding its ocean. "I don't know how," I whispered. "You will," he answered. "For now, believe. Hold nothing back." And then, as gently as he had come, he was gone. No burst of light, no dramatic exit. Just the quiet return of a hospital ward in the middle of the night, machines humming, my daughter breathing, my heart burning with a new kind of fire. I sat there for a long time, staring at the space where he had stood, my mind trying to catch up with my soul. I was not asleep. I was not delusional. I was a woman who had just met the one she had unknowingly cried out for in the depths of despair. That night, Orohi's vital signs improved beyond every prediction. By morning, she was sitting up, weak but smiling. Nurses whispered, Doctors checked charts twice. Vikram stared, as if looking at a miracle he dared not name. But I knew. I didn't yet have all the words, but I knew. The man who stood by that bed, the one whose eyes held a universe of compassion, had answered. The crisis had not only changed the course of my daughter's illness, it had changed the course of my own heart. I had gone looking for healing and found the healer. And nothing, from that night on, would ever be the same. I have replayed that night in my mind 1,000 times. The way the room felt alive, the way his words didn't sound like sound but truth poured straight into my bones, the way Orohi's chest moved with a peace I hadn't seen since the day she collapsed. It was as if time itself had split open and let heaven touch earth. But the miracle wasn't just a feeling. It wasn't just a mother's hope. It became flesh and blood reality, measured in charts, scans, and the stunned silence of doctors who had long since prepared us for the worst. That morning, when Vikram returned to the hospital, he was tired, unshaven, carrying the weight of weeks of fear. I almost didn't know how to tell him. How do you put into words something you yourself don't fully understand, but know is truer than anything you've ever believed? He stepped into the room, and before I could speak, he froze. Orohi was awake. Not just awake, smiling weakly, trying to reach for him. "Papa," she whispered, her voice scratchy but steady. I saw Vikram's face collapse, not in grief, but in the kind of emotion that rips through every defense a man builds around his heart. He rushed to her side, cupped her face with both hands, kissed her forehead again and again, and then looked at me like I had been hiding the cure to death itself. "What happened?" he asked. His voice was a tremor. I didn't know how to start. I wanted to say it gently, but the truth pressed itself out of me before I could craft diplomatic caution. "Jesus came," I said quietly. He stared at me. For a second, I thought he would laugh, or worse, dismiss it as hysteria born of exhaustion. But he didn't. He just kept looking at me, searching, questioning, hoping. "What do you mean?" "Jesus came." I told him everything. Every word. Every detail. I didn't dramatize it. I didn't soften it. I told him about the way the air changed, the way he stood at the foot of the bed, the way he spoke, the promise he made, and the way Orohi began to breathe with a peace that had eluded her for weeks. When I finished, Vikram didn't speak for a long time. He just sat beside Orohi, holding her hand like a lifeline. The doctors arrived later that morning for their rounds. Their faces said everything before their mouths could catch up. Her fever was gone. The swelling in her lungs had receded. The bacterial count that had been poisoning her blood had inexplicably dropped overnight. The lead specialist checked the data 3 times, muttering to himself, then finally said the words we had not dared to hope for. "This doesn't happen. Not like this. But she's recovering, rapidly." He didn't call it a miracle. He called it unexpected, unprecedented, medically unexplainable. But I heard what he wasn't saying. Over the next 24 hours, Orohi's strength returned in leaps, not steps. By the 3rd day, she was sitting up on her own, laughing softly at the nurses who now hovered not in concern, but in joyful disbelief. By the 5th day, she was walking the length of the ward, 4 still in her hand, but her spirit free as if death had been told, very clearly, not today. And with every hour of healing, I felt something healing in me too. Not just relief, not just gratitude, something deeper. Like a heart long starved of oxygen finally taking full, clean breaths again. One evening, while Orohi dozed peacefully, Vikram sat beside me in the small visitors' lounge. He stared at the floor for a while, then looked up, eyes red from 100 suppressed tears. "I don't know what to do with this," he admitted. "Everything I've believed, everything my family, my culture, my education has built, none of it knows how to hold what just happened. I understood. I had felt that same quake in the foundation of everything familiar. The difference was that I had already crossed a line, the quiet yes I had given in that hospital ward when I told Jesus, I don't know how, but I believe you. You don't have to do anything yet, I told Vikram gently. But you saw what I saw. You've touched what no human hand could fix. Our daughter was gone, and now she is not. That's not random. That's mercy. He nodded slowly. No argument. No explanation. Just silence, the kind that tells you a heart is being rearranged from the inside out. Word of Orohi's sudden recovery spread quickly in the hospital. Nurses whispered about it in hallways. A senior doctor came to see for himself, asking questions that had no medical answers. Some offered polite congratulations. Others leaned in, asking in hushed tones what exactly had happened the night her vitals turned. I told the truth every time, even when my voice shook. Jesus came. Some smiled, some nodded cautiously, some walked away, uncomfortable. But I no longer carried the weight of proving anything. I had seen the impossible bow to a name I barely understood, but now trusted with my whole being. The day we were discharged, Orohi walked out of that hospital on her own, waving at the staff who had once counted her among the lost. Vikram walked beside her, quiet, thoughtful, holding her hand as if afraid to let go of what had just been given back to us. And me? I walked behind them, carrying no flowers, no discharge papers, no ceremonial offering, only a heart that now beat to a different rhythm. I had begged for healing, and I had received a miracle. But what I didn't expect, what I couldn't have prepared for, was how that miracle would reach deeper than flesh and blood. It wasn't just my daughter who had been saved. Something in me had been reborn. The days after Orohi's healing were filled with a quiet kind of awe. It was not the loud, celebratory joy that you see in movies or festivals. It was a fragile joy, like glass holding light, beautiful but aware of how easily the world could throw stones. We returned home, and everything looked the same. The polished floors, the carefully chosen paintings of gods in every corner, the incense that still sat in silver bowls, the ceremonial cloth draped over the family altar, nothing had moved. Yet inside me, everything had shifted. It was as though someone had taken my soul out of its old frame and placed it in a new one, but my body was still walking through the same house. Vikram kept his thoughts guarded. He loved me, and I could see that love fighting to make peace with the unshakable facts before him. Our daughter had been dying, and now she was not. The name on my lips the night of her turnaround was not one he had ever uttered in prayer. It was not a name our parents had blessed. It was a name that belonged to a faith he had, at best, regarded as foreign, and at worst, as disruptive to the rhythm of our ancestral duties. The first sign of cost came quietly. A phone call. My mother's voice on the other end was soft at first. I heard Orohi is better. Praise be to the gods. I swallowed. My heart wanted to just say yes and leave it there, to let her have her peace. But the truth now sat heavy in my chest like a stone that refused to be hidden. Amma, I said gently, she is better. But it wasn't the gods. Jesus healed her. Silence. Not angry at first. Just stunned. Like a pause that searched for the right words and found none that could fix what had just been said. Finally, her voice came back, thin and sharp like a reed ready to snap. Leela, do not speak like this. You are confused. You are tired. We have a temple opening next week. Bring Orohi for a proper blessing. Don't talk to your father about this. He will not understand. I wanted to obey. I wanted to not create storms in the ocean of a family already navigating the shame of too many cultural compromises. But the memory of his voice, his presence, his touch in that hospital room had marked me. I could not lie anymore, not even to keep peace. Amma, I said, barely above a whisper, I have met him. He is real. I cannot pretend he is not. This time the silence carried weight. When we visited a week later, the house that once welcomed us with warm meals and laughter felt colder. My father refused to meet my eyes. My mother fed Orohi, but every word she spoke to me had the stiffness of someone speaking to a stranger. At one point, my father said quietly, without looking up from his newspaper, "Leela, you are a diplomat. You represent the dignity of our family and our country. Do not throw away centuries of faith for a story told by outsiders." I wanted to cry, but I didn't. Instead, I prayed silently under my breath. Lord, help me love them even now. The second sign of cost came in the workplace. Diplomatic circles are made of whispered networks. People know when something changes in you, even if you never declare it. I still wore my sares, still attended official functions, still spoke in the calm tones of negotiation, but the light in me was not hidden, it refused to stay dim. I stopped attending temple ceremonies arranged as cultural events at embassies. I declined invitations to rituals that had once been mandatory. Instead, I found myself, in quiet moments, reading the Gospels on my phone between meetings, feeling the words burn with a clarity no briefing note had ever carried. One afternoon, a senior colleague cornered me in a hallway. "Leela," he said, "there are murmurs. They say you've converted." His voice didn't carry anger. It carried concern not for my soul, but for my career. "You know what this means," he continued. "Trust is everything in our line of work. Religion is not private when it touches politics. If the wrong minister hears that you've turned from the gods of your ancestors, doors will close. Fast." I stood there, holding the weight of two worlds, the one I had built with strategy, study, and sacrifice, and the one I had just stepped into by grace, unearned, undeniable. For the first time in my life, I spoke without calculating the impact. "I cannot deny what I have seen," I said. "If it costs me titles, then it costs me titles. But I will not lie about the one who gave my daughter back to me." He stared at me for a long time, then sighed, not in contempt, but in resignation. He placed a hand on my shoulder and said, "You were the best among us. I hope your God is worth what you're about to lose." He was. I knew it deep in my bones. But knowing doesn't shield you from pain. It just keeps you from abandoning truth when pain comes. The third sign of cost came from within our own walls. Vikram loved me, yes. But love bends under pressure it was never meant to carry alone. His parents called, distressed. They told him that a Christian daughter-in-law would bring shame. That it would confuse Orohi, that it would uproot the balance of generations. They spoke of Dishna, of curses, of broken lines. One night, Vikram sat at the edge of our bed, head in his hands, and said quietly, "Leela, I am trying to hold this family together. I am trying to respect what happened, but I cannot stop the avalanche. Every call is another crack in the dam. Are we ready for what this will become?" I reached for his hand, tears in my eyes. "I don't have easy answers," I said. "I only know this, he came when no one else could. He healed our daughter when every other hand failed. I will not let the opinions of people erase the mercy of God." He nodded slowly, pain all over his face, but somewhere in his eyes, I saw a small seed of surrender. "Not to me," but to the truth that was chasing him just as it had chased me. The cost of following Christ is not paid in a single moment. It is paid daily, in the small, sharp edges of rejection, the quiet loss of belonging, the professional doors that no longer open, the family tables where silence says what words cannot. But I discovered something I never expected. Every time a door closed, a deeper peace opened. Every time someone turned away, his presence turned toward me with a closeness that made loneliness less heavy. I had been a woman of influence. I had navigated powers, systems, and egos across continents. But now, I was learning the strange, beautiful strength of weakness, of letting go of the life I had built and trusting the one who had already carried me through death and back. The cost was real. But so was the joy. And though I could not yet see where the road ahead would take us, I knew this much: there was no going back. Not now. Not ever. The first months after I gave my heart to Christ felt like stepping out of a burning building into open air. I was coughing from the smoke of the past, trembling from what had been lost, but breathing, truly breathing, for the first time. Everything familiar was still around me: the same city, the same office, the same neighbors who smiled politely in hallways and gossiped behind closed doors. But my eyes no longer looked at the world with the same filter. It was as if someone had taken a cloth to a window I thought was clear, and wiped away years of dust I didn't even know was there. Mornings became sacred. Before the emails, before the meetings, before Orohi's school run, I would sit at the small corner of my bedroom with a worn Bible a friend had given me. I didn't read it like a manual. I read it like a person listening for a heartbeat. Sometimes I understood the words. Sometimes I didn't. But even in the confusion, there was life. The stories weren't just ancient accounts anymore. They were mirrors. They were windows. They were the quiet confirmation that I wasn't crazy, that what I had experienced in that hospital room was part of a much bigger story, older than kingdoms and deeper than cultures. Orohi changed too. She was still a child, still mischievous, still fascinated by small things like the way rain made patterns on the glass, but she carried a peace that was hard to miss. She didn't speak in theological terms. She just seemed lighter, as though she knew, without anyone needing to explain, that she had been pulled back from a place she didn't want to go. Sometimes she would tell me, softly, that she had dreams she couldn't fully describe, dreams of a man standing by her bed, holding her hand when no one else was in the room, dreams of a light that didn't burn, but wrapped her like a blanket. Vikram was slower. I never pushed him. Love never forces. It just stays, gently, steadily, quietly testifying. He still attended ceremonies at times, partly out of habit, partly out of a hope to keep peace with his family. But little by little, I saw the cracks forming, not cracks of collapse, but cracks where light got in. He began asking questions at night. Not hostile, not defensive, just real questions. Leela, he would whisper, when Orohi was asleep, why did he choose us? We weren't even looking for him. And I would answer with the only honest thing I could say, because love doesn't wait to be found. It comes looking. Professionally, my role shifted like sand under a moving tide. I wasn't fired, but I was quietly moved to less visible assignments. Invitations stopped coming for certain dinners. My once open line to ministers now went unanswered longer than usual. I wasn't surprised. Influence in the world is a currency, and I had stopped paying in the old coins. But strangely, I didn't mourn it like I thought I would. There was a freedom in not needing to keep up the performance, in not needing to pretend that tradition alone kept me steady. Instead, I found myself praying before high-stakes meetings, not with scripted words, but with simple honesty: Lord, help me see what you see. Help me speak what matters. Help me be kind even when they are not. Sometimes he answered in ways I could trace. A negotiation that should have collapsed suddenly found common ground. An official known for arrogance softened during a crucial discussion. Other times, he simply gave me peace in the middle of hostility, a stillness that let me stay composed when every word spoken at the table was meant to rattle me. At home, our rhythms bent slowly around this new center. We began attending a small fellowship quietly held in someone's apartment. There were no grand temples, no polished rituals, no chants or garlands. Just a circle of ordinary people, teachers, drivers, business owners, students. Singing softly, praying simply, reading the same pages I read each morning but now out loud, together. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't powerful in the way politics measures power. But it was alive. You could feel it. Like a river running underground, steady and unstoppable. The more time I spent in that circle, the more the fear of what people would say faded. Not because people had stopped talking, they hadn't, but because their words no longer had authority over my peace. There were still hard days. Days when Orohi came home from school with questions she wasn't ready to carry, because classmates had whispered that her family had betrayed their faith. Days when relatives called Vikram with angry words, accusing him of weakness, accusing me of manipulation. We didn't always have perfect answers. Sometimes all we could say was, "We are following the one who saved our child." Life after conversion wasn't a fairy tale. It wasn't the end of problems. It was the beginning of a different kind of strength. Not the strength of diplomacy, or heritage, or wealth, or name. The strength of knowing, truly knowing, that even if every wall falls, there is one who remains. I had spent years building a life that could weather politics. Now I was learning to live a life that could weather eternity. And with every step into that unknown, the same quiet certainty guided me. The hand that reached for us in our darkest hour would not let go now. Not ever. I never set out to be a messenger. I never woke up one day and thought, I will stand in front of nations and speak about the God who healed my child. I was trained to speak in measured words, in safe words, in words that moved between politics like a river that never broke its banks. For years, my voice belonged to institutions, to governments, to treaties. But now, it felt as if that same voice had been taken out of its box and given back to its maker. It started quietly. A friend, someone I had once negotiated trade routes with, called me after hearing from someone else about Orohi. His voice was skeptical, the way people sound when they want to believe, but are afraid of being fooled. Leela, he said, what really happened with your daughter? I've heard stories. I told him the truth. Not dressed up, not dramatized, not turned into something that would make me look spiritual or important. Just the plain story. She was dying, I was empty, and Jesus met us in that hospital room. He was silent for a while. Then he said softly, "Can you pray for my wife? She's been sick for months." That was the first prayer I ever prayed for someone outside my home. My hands shook. My words stumbled. But something in the room shifted, not in a way that could be measured in charts or temperature, but in a way that cracked open the shell of fear we both carried. More calls came. Not many at first, but enough to make me see that this story wasn't mine to keep hidden. Diplomats, businessmen, even a politician who had mocked religion in private, they all wanted to know how a dying girl had walked out of the hospital, as if death itself had been told to leave. One day, standing in a conference room with officials from 3 countries, I realized I had a choice. I could keep pretending that my life had not been rewritten, or I could quietly, gently, truthfully, start telling the story wherever the Spirit gave me courage. So I began. Not with sermons. Not with speeches. With honesty. When someone asked about my calm, intense meetings, I told them, it isn't mine. I pray now before I speak. When someone noticed Orohi's energy returning faster than expected, I said, we had help, not from medicine, from mercy. When someone asked how I could risk the opinions of family, I told them, because the one who gave us our daughter back is worth more than my reputation. And little by little, the message grew. I was invited, first by a small women's gathering, then by a private fellowship of diplomats, to tell the full story. Each time, I stood there, heart pounding, knowing that my name, my position, my passport, none of it could protect me from ridicule, political backlash, or quiet erasure from future opportunities. But each time, the same certainty returned: if I remain silent, I betray the truth that saved us. So I spoke. And when I spoke, I noticed something in the room, a stillness. Not boredom. Not polite waiting. A stillness that felt like hearts leaning forward. Some cried quietly, not even knowing why. Some asked questions I had no polished answers for. Some left in a hurry, unable to sit with what they had just heard. But no one walked away untouched. Not because of me. I had no power to move anyone, but because the one who had met us in our weakest hour was now using our story as a key, unlocking doors in other hearts. I learned that message to the world doesn't always mean microphones and stages. Sometimes it means one trembling conversation at a time. Sometimes it means sitting with a grieving mother in a quiet cafe, holding her hand, and saying, I know what it feels like to beg the universe for one more breath in your child's lungs, and I know the one who gave it to mine. Sometimes it means enduring the cold stares of colleagues while refusing to compromise what's true. Sometimes it means smiling at old friends who now keep their distance, knowing love is patient even when it's rejected. I had spent years representing a nation. Now, without ceremony, without appointment, without a title, I found myself representing a kingdom. Not as a preacher, not as a saint, but as a witness. I am not the hero of this story. I was the desperate mother. He is the hero, the one who stepped into a room no human authority could control, touched what medicine couldn't, and called us into life, body and soul. That is my message to the world. He is real. He is near. He still heals. And he still finds people who aren't even looking for him, and calls them by name. If you are listening to this now, wherever you are, whatever you carry, the weight, the doubts, the fear of being foolish, hear this from a woman who had everything but peace. He is not an idea. He is not a foreign import. He is not a threat to culture, or family, or dignity. He is the one who made you, the one who knows you, the one who already loved you before you ever thought of him. I lost status. I lost invitations. I lost pieces of a world I once worked tirelessly to hold together. But I gained a truth that no man, no law, no threat, no whisper can ever take away. That is the exchange I live with now. And if I had to choose again, I would choose him, every time. As I stand here today, looking back over every step that led me from a woman of ambition to a woman of surrender, I feel a stillness in my heart that no position, no influence, no human accolade could have ever given me. My name once carried weight in diplomatic circles. My signature once opened doors in powerful rooms. Now, my life itself has become a testimony, not of what I achieved, but of what Christ has done in me. The journey was not smooth. It was not without scars. I lost friends. I lost status. I lost the sense of belonging I once took for granted among my own people. Yet, for every loss, I found something far greater, a peace that held me steady when fear roared around me, a love that carried me when strength left my body, and a truth that no threat, no shame, no pressure could ever raise. I think often of my daughter. Her laughter now fills our home, like sunlight pouring through open windows. Sometimes, I find myself watching her while she sleeps, remembering the nights I sat beside her bed, my heart breaking with helplessness. And then I remember the moment her breath returned, her eyes opened, and hope came rushing back like a flood. It was more than a healing, it was a signpost pointing straight to the heart of God, a reminder that His power is not distant or cold. It is near. It is personal. It is alive. There were times, in those early months, when I questioned if I could continue. The weight of rejection felt heavy. The looks of disappointment from those I had once admired pierced deep. But every time, in the quiet of prayer, I heard that same gentle voice that had called me the first night whisper again, "Do not be afraid. I am with you." And so, I walk forward, not as a perfect woman, not as someone who holds all the answers, but as a witness to what can happen when a heart opens, even for a moment, to the reality of Jesus Christ. My life is no longer defined by titles or traditions. It is defined by grace. If there is anything I want you to take from my story, it is this: no one is beyond His reach. No pain is too deep, no background too complicated, no heart too hardened for His light to break through. I am living proof. My daughter is living proof. Today, I stand unashamed. My journey cost me much, but what I received in return is beyond measure. I found not just a new path, I found life itself. I found the one who gave it, who redeemed it, who filled it with meaning. And now, wherever I go, whether it is a quiet room or a crowded hall, my heart carries one simple, unshakable truth: Jesus Christ is real, and when He enters a life, everything changes. So this is my closing word, not as a diplomat, not as someone trying to persuade you, but as a woman who was lost and is now found. He is worth everything.